friends here who are going to present us with this what if iwi told their stories. So I pass over to you. Welcome.
Thank you. You like to start? You get to
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko puke one ko tuai wharepapa no maunga, ko Motueka, ko Rewaka Nāwa, ko te awhina te marae, ko Ngati Rarua, ko te Atiawa nā iwi. I'm from Motueka, but I have the privilege of being part of people from te Atiawa and Ngati Rarua, and I also whakapapa to tō rangatira and Ngati Tama. When we were asked to speak about the iwi voice in this area, I was lucky enough to be at a hui and Hemi was there. So it's like, cool, Hemi, will you come and speak, please? And the reason I wanted Hemi to speak was I was with our whanaunga Nuki, and we had Witi and Maira at Te Noinenga, a kumu, the library of Motueka. And he was so impressed with the titi, the mutton bird, that we fed him, thanks to my cousin, Deborah Lee, who's in the audience, that he put down the sofa to come to Motueka to run a workshop with 30 writers. And my cousin Nuki phoned me a few days after and she said, look, I've really been thinking, what is a Māori writer? You know, who tells our stories? And she said, Donna, it's not our writers that get published in books that tell our stories. And she is a published writer. She said, actually, it's our whai kōrero people, it's our waiata writers, and it's our carvers. And she said, please, please, and she had this list, please include Hemi in this workshop. So I thought, I saw Hemi at this hui, and I thought, right, Hemi. So, and our cousin Ihaka will probably arrive late and come through the doors, and we'll all be charmed by him, and so it'll all be kitipai. I'm speaking today as a curator of 20 odd, and when I say the word odd, actually it's probably the best thing. As Māori artists, we struggle with so many things, and in Te Tau Ihu, it has been really interesting for us. I have been here in the last 25 years. I grew up in Taranaki. I was so te Atiawa, Taranaki tūturu. I knew my whakapapa, I lived with my whānau, we went to our marae. I was very confident about who I was. I come to my first hui at Te Awhina Marae, and Robert Stevens looks at me and goes, right, and I go, yeah, I'm Te Atiawa, and he said, no, you're not, you're Ngati Rarua. And I had never heard of Ngati Rarua, and sure enough, I'm Ngati Rarua. You know, so it has been an interesting time for many of us who have come here to rediscover our whakapapa. And a lot of that comes from the tents. My family went back to Taranaki. Also, Parihaka. We went back to Parihaka as well. So many of us left these lands and we returned home. The other interesting thing is that Te Tau Ihu is so interesting because there are 8 of us that share this whenua. And there is still controversy about where the borders are. And then there is the thing, so okay, there's us, but what about Kura Haupo? And what about the people who were the original people here? And as a storyteller, I find that really difficult because I, for example, want to talk about tuo wharepapa, but that's not our maunga. We never called it tuo wharepapa. So who did, and what were these stories? And so when we built the library, it was all about storytelling. I had an interesting thing, as Hemi probably know, that according to TDC and their rules about engaging Māori, we as Ngati Rarua and Te Atiawa, we believe we are mana whenua. Ngati Tama also believe that they are mana whenua. We don't always agree on that, but the council has different rules and regulations about who they have to engage with. So that was an interesting process for us, which is continuing. And so my thing was I had Ngati Rarua, Te Atiawa, Ngati Tama. Then the land was Wakatū, it was tense land. So I had to also negotiate with Wakatū, and I also had to negotiate with Ngati Rarua, Te Atiawa Iwi Trust and the marae and Mātāwaka. So that was 7 groups just to put art in a library, plus TDC. So that's 8 groups that I had to talk to about putting stories in the library. The interesting thing was that at one stage all the iwi pulled out. They did not want to be in the library. So I decided that we needed a Māori context within the library. And the iwi said, that's good, you can do it, but don't involve our stories. So it meant going back to look at other people's stories that of people like Hui Te Rangiora, who belong to all of us. We all have stories of Hui Te Rangiora. And looking at kind of not generic, but stories that Huriawa, the taniwha. So we all had to sort of work our way around. And the library is really like a living book. Every single art piece in that building has a story, and it all connects and it all has a flow. Because in the end we said they wanted to come back in. So we were going in and out and round and round. And that's kind of what consultation is actually about. And it's tricky, but if you really want to know the story, and if you really want to stand in space which is tika, which has a truth and a tikanga around it, and it has a goodness about it, then actually it's good to have all those discussions and voices. And it may be a long process. And I remember one of our uncles, Uncle Rory Stafford, he's really, he's fly-in kaumatua, as he calls himself, and he often says, don't talk to me, sort it out yourselves, I am having to, I don't live here. But for the important taki, it's great to have Uncle Rory on your side. And anyway, I phoned him, I said, Uncle, I need to see you. And he said, right, Donna, we've got this blessing of a po in the park. I'm free at breakfast time, 8 o'clock. Now, most people would sort of sit there and go, okay, I'll drive out to Maraho and I'll have breakfast with my uncle. But it's actually a trick. It's actually a trick. How dare you turn up just for breakfast? So I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, drive out to Maraho. Hadn't been to Maraho forever, so didn't even know where it was. So I'm walking through the bush by myself. Of course, it's darkness because it's about the first light hitting the taonga. So I'm walking around in the dark, and you can't call out, hello, So it's really a bit, And luckily a camera went on, and I just saw this red light. So I was able to make it there. And it's all those tricks about engagement. Because yes, how dare I turn up just for breakfast? His question was really, yes, Donna, I will be there. And will you be there? So we are wonderful to deal with. We have all these different layers. And as I said, the borders of this town, which part is Ngati Kuia, which is Kuata, are they here, which is Te Atiawa, Rarua, Ngati Tō, Rangatira, and now I'm sort of doing this and saying, which ones have I? Ngati Apa, Ngati Tama, have I got them all? Rangitane aren't here, so we're all good. But it's understanding, and it's quite exciting. And I love, when I have friends and children go through Europe, and they're crossing over in borders. That's actually what Aotearoa is, and Te Tauihu. In many ways, you cross over a river and you are in a different iwi's rohe. And the stories are different. And the bridge may separate these iwi, but their view of the story that took part in the middle is going to be quite different from the other sides. So whose story do you tell? And I love as Māori, we never say, nah, you've got it wrong. We always sort of go, oh, that's interesting. I had an interesting whakapapa question once. I was at, is it the marae in Ngati marae in Pouwhakahaere. And I was there, and our Auntie Charlotte Solomon, who was this regal woman, she'd been teaching karanga, and she did this wonderful thing. I was so excited because it had Te Raupraha, was the po outside, and I was so excited because I knew that we had some whakapapa connections to Te Raupraha. So I go, all the wives are there, and then Te Raupraha is on the top, and I'm going, oh, you know, Auntie, you know, which one is Kahuirangi? And she looked at me and she said, oh, darling, I don't know that one. So rather than saying, never, you know, you're wrong, she said, no, darling, I've never heard of that one. And so it's often for us, it's sort of negotiating the storytelling and being able to say, okay, I may not know that story, and you know that side of your story, but maybe we've got another story, you know. So, but it's like, you know, we say all the time, we had the police out here earlier today, you know, 3 people could witness it, and I'd say there were 3 police cars, another person would say there were 5, another person would say, what police cars? You know, so we all have different lenses of telling stories, and that's the joy of being Māori, I think. That is intricacies of living our lives and living in this Māori world. And I think it's an absolute pleasure. One further story, the most important part of the blessing of whenua and putting down a koha to a stone for a building going up. If we don't believe that's done right or something, we look at a ipukaerea, which holds the mana of the whenua and the mana whenua, and it's often a bowl or a calabash. And I love the word ipukaerea anyway, but I had the king of the Tākaka Hill for us was Bruce Mitchell, a wonderful artist that many of you would know. And he has Māori children that I know, and I knew his wife and whānau. And anyway, I chose this beautiful piece of Bruce's, and rather than holding the mauri in its stillness, it has these wonderful little grooves in the stone, and I wanted the mauri to be able to flow rather than to just sit. And I did not know he was not Māori. And it was kind of like, oh my gosh. But the beauty is that his children, he has several children, but one of them married into Rema Pickett's whānau. So his mokos are mana whenua. And every time they come into the library, which is at least 3 or 4 times a week, they go straight to that ipukaerea and they pat it and they love it. So I love that. I love that in the end it is our people who get to hold that and love that piece because they love their grandfather. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So it's about the journey, if anything. It is about the journey, and it's always an interesting journey. So now I want to introduce you to this beautiful whanaunga. Hemi.
Kia ora everybody, I've just been kind of taking notes as I look around the room and looking at all these beautiful ideas. Actually, I'll sit down a bit more. My name is Hemi Sundgren, and I've been into Tauihu for just over 2 years now, but I've been coming here for the last probably 20 years. My wife is from Westport and I've got family all through Nelson, so Nelson and top of the south is not familiar to me. I've spent a heck of a lot of time here, but in the last 2 years I've moved here, and I've currently working with one of the iwi here called Ngati Tama, and whom I've had previous relationships with, because you'll all know probably that we have very, very strong relationships with the people in Taranaki. We immigrated here in the 1820s, and so there's still this very, very strong relationship we have with the people back in Taranaki, whereby siblings came down here and other siblings stayed back in Taranaki, and of course over time people have had their families, but we've maintained this very, very, very strong relationship between each other, and families have come and gone between here and Taranaki, the Kapiti Coast and Wellington for the last, well, since 1820 actually. So it feels like a home away from home for me, and I know a lot of the whānau here whom I've spent a lot of time with and are related to back along to the Kapiti Coast and Wellington and Taranaki. So yeah, that's just a little bit about my whakapapa. I was born and raised in a place called Pouwhakahaere. It wasn't a thriving metropolis like it is now with the expressway going through. It was a very, very small community. Waikanai Paraparau in Otaki, and so lived most of my life there, and ended up living in a place called, in Taranaki, in a place called Parihaka with a relation of ours, and so I lived there from the time I was 18, and have gone back and forward and spent time with the whānau there for a long period of time. Of course, I am a practicing artist as well, and I went through an apprenticeship with was called the Māori Arts and Crafts Institute. Who's heard of the Māori Arts and Crafts Institute in Rotorua? Well, it was the Māori Arts, and it was called NZ Maki back then, which is the Māori Arts and Crafts Institute, which has now been rebranded under a name called Te Puia. And so that entity was established under the Māori Arts and Crafts Act by Apirana Ngata, whom saw a very, very, very steep decline in the knowledge of arts. Actually, all of the Māori artistic forms were starting to kind of show signs of degradation and loss. And there were very, very, very few old people that were practicing artists that held this deep knowledge set across a whole suite of different Māori artistic pursuits. They probably weren't artistic pursuits back then. They would have been just normal functioning day-to-day work for whānau back then. But Apirana Ngata established the Māori Arts and Crafts Institute so that those art forms would never ever be lost, and they purposely implemented a program of work that sought to revitalise and rebuild capacity and capability intergenerationally so that these art forms weren't lost. And some of you may be aware that they did that by the establishment of carving houses. And so you have a set of over between probably 30 and 50 houses that were carved between the 1920s right up until the 1980s by Pine Taiapa, John Taiapa. Apirana Ngata instigated that. And they created big communities of community hubs and artistic hubs, because when you carve a house, you're not only carving, you're weaving tukutuku, you're weaving whāriki, you're handing down the stories and the whakapapa to the communities which they're working with. And so my uncle actually was taken from Otaki as a 15-year-old in 1935 and taken on the road, so to speak, and they went from Otaki and carved Waitara, they went to Gisborne and carved Te Poho o Rawiri, and then they went to Wanganui and carved there at Putiki, and then they carved different parts of the country. They became kind of intimately involved in these community art hubs, and so they became quite flourishing little communities between the 1930s and 1950s. Anyway, I'm going off track, but that's kind of what led to the establishment of the Māori Arts and Crafts Institute, whereby the government would fund and establish a tourism venture to fund an ongoing Māori Arts and Crafts Institute. And then we came on as apprentices. They took 3 apprentices to 4 apprentices every year, went through an interview process and a selection process from different parts of the country, We came to Rotorua for 4 years as an apprentice, and they just basically taught us everything they could about the traditional arts. Carving, tool tech, carving, materials, how to access materials in a culturally safe way, how to apply those materials to artworks, how to apply those materials into building, house carving and so on and so forth. So I was very, very fortunate to come out of that kind of, that school of learning, and so that's what continues to influence me today. And so, yeah, it's just a little bit about my history. And so, what if we could tell these stories? I think so. I come at this on the basis of an artistic practitioner, mostly, and over time that passion in me has developed and branched out into a whole lot of different fields. We started with carving wood. There's only so much you can do in terms of carving wood for 5 years, looking at wood for 5 years and carving a million little detailed pakati, we call them, little notchings over 5 years. So everyone, as you are when you're young, you want to branch out and try everything. So some went to stone. We all tried stone, we all tried pounamu, we all tried blinking. Tattooing, actually, that started to emerge in the mid to late 90s. So we tried tattooing, and then we all went to bronze, and then, you know, so as you do, you try and get as many feathers to your cap when you're an artist. But ultimately, I think the space that's really exciting me at the moment, and how I can really see how iwis can start to tell more and more of these stories, is through the built architecture, which we're starting to see emerge really, really strongly now. And I've been involved in a couple of projects, one in Dunedin through the construction of the Te Rangi Hiroa College, and another one in Taranaki called Ngā Motu House, and there's been some others as well. But ultimately, if you peel away, I mean, the house and the structure and the built architecture is the end point, right? And so we've had to really, really try and influence the planners, the architects, and the drafters in a way that sets the right foundation for the design, because what comes up should actually reflect your base set of principles, designs, and first principles, I call them. Otherwise, when we ask ourselves, well, why did you put that colour on there? If you don't have a very, very strong set of principles and values in your initial thinking, then it's hard to explain to people why that colour is like that, or why we've got a playground over here, or why we've got sculptures here, there, and everywhere. Yeah. And so we always like to go back to this first principles things about, okay, well, what are this town's first principles? What are this town's values? What do we value as a city or as a town? And how is that reflected in all of these things that we've got on the wall? I kind of see these things as the what and the how. They're fantastic things, but if I asked why we created a taonga puoro soundscape, so that, like, why? What does that speak to about who we are? What does having a public garden that celebrates native flora and fauna speak to about our first principles and our values? That's what floats my boat anyway. But these are all awesome things, fantastic. But if we peel away the layers and say, well, why? I think that's a good starting point for us. And I'm not sure as a city or as a town we've actually started to dive into that. What are the things that we celebrate as Nelson, Tasman, or whoever we want to articulate ourselves to be? And how do those things manifest themselves in the what, the how, and the why? I suppose it's just, I don't want to tell people how to suck eggs, but they're very, very, very astute and very knowledgeable people in the planning and architectural space. But those are all the things that iwi will look at, I look at, and the people I hang out look at. It's the why. And of course, throughout our many of you will know, iwi are intergenerational. There's one thing we do have, that's permanence. We are always going to be here. And we have memory. We don't forget. Rightly or wrongly, we don't forget. So we have memory and we have permanence. What are the things that bring us together? That's my view anyway. What are the things that bring us together? What are the universal principles and values that help us celebrate the unique things about us all separately, at the same time the things that bring us together. And so from a, what if iwi could tell our stories perspective, I'd like to see that we start on the basis of first principles and values that resonate with our young, because ultimately they're going to be able to be the people that are the caretakers and the kaitiaki and the ones that are able to talk to what manifests itself out of the course of these developments. And so we must be intergenerational. There's a common term that's coming out now, Donna, mokopuna decisions. We make decisions for the benefit of the next generations. So we need to, I think it's important for us to think about that. So what if we could tell our stories? Well, I think we could tell our stories through architecture and the built architecture and the built space. I think we've got a heck of a lot of opportunity to be able to do that through various manifestations, opportunities for space, creating the right space for our people to come together, our artistic practitioners to come together, Māori and non-Māori actually. I've been inspired by a heck of a lot by our Native American artists. We, as Māori, we have learned heaps, a heck of a lot from our other Indigenous nations and our Scandinavian nations actually. So there's a heck of a lot for us to come together on, and that's kind of what excites me about the future of the city in Nelson. And so I suppose, what if we could tell our stories? I think we could tell our stories by having the right space, collaborative space for people to come together. When artists to come together, you all know there's sparks that fly, and so there's this amazing kind of energy that's built through collaborative space, whether or not, in all its forms actually. It doesn't necessarily need to be applied arts, it could be drama and music and all sorts of spaces, but I have definitely been a part of a space that creates that kind of energy. And so I suppose that's kind of, in a nutshell, if I could kind of respond to that question. There are a heap of opportunities if we could tell our stories through infrastructure. There's ways in which we could tell our stories through infrastructure, through the way in which the city's kind of set out through the master plan, through landscaping, application of rongoa principles and ideas, using endemic species and rongoa species that apply to us here, the steering away from, potentially, from some of the exotic species, or not. So it comes down to the why. If we were to have key exotic species here as part of the master plan, then why? Helps people understand the context, yeah? And so I think there's a million ways and applications that we, if we could tell our stories, would really benefit from. But I'm particularly interested in the built space.
I would have to, my husband's one of the few Māori architects, and I love building, and having been with him since he registered as an architect. But often I'm getting called in to beautify, to Māorify the building. So I find it really, it's kind of like, oh, am I going to go in, or aren't I? And then if I don't go in, there's nothing, And I get really angry. No, not anger. It's kind of like tired, actually. I'm tired now. That why am I being called in? You want our artwork, you want me to make a story that justifies the context of your building being bicultural, multicultural, whatever, but you don't want to have me in the meeting at the beginning when you're talking about what the building stands for. What is it? And every building should have a story. From the beginning, every building should have. And the story always starts with the land, the whenua. So we should be able to, as many of you know, because you came to our play about the Nelson tents, there was that fear, oh my God, am I living on tents land, And how do I find out whether we are living on tents land or not? We should know that. The fact that so many of us did not know about the tents, and that history isn't that long ago, really, So it's buildings, I agree, infrastructure, buildings, planting, we talk a lot about playgrounds, all those sort of things. What are the stories? And don't just put a taniwha up and call it Huriawa, you know, talk to the people who are the kaitiaki of Huriawa. Is it even appropriate for Huriawa to be there? You know, so that's the shared values, you know, the shared values of the appropriateness of modifying. If you don't engage with us, then it does become token. And it becomes sad because there is so much beauty that could be shared in this relationship. And when I get asked about, you know, what if we told our stories? I mean, how amazing that you could walk down at the Maitai Awhio and you would know the stories about the river, and you would know who lived there and what fish were there, you know, how did they live, you know, what were the sort of fish that were there. And I went to our beautiful friend Kiriopa, he passed away, and it was the first time in 100 years that they'd had waka come down that river, you know, and it was just such a beautiful thing to think that maybe in years to come we can have little waka going up and down the Maitai River, and I'm really excited. But the other thing is, in engaging with our artists, it's hard. And so we've put together, Anne, Louise, Paul and myself, involved with this project at Parapara Road, hopefully, called Awhio, which is a hub for Māori, Toi Māori, and with a kaupapa Māori, and giving a place for artists to be, and also a feeder place for people to come and buy things, but engage with Māori art as well. And we're doing this because we want our stories to be told within this rohe. But we have to have a relationship with iwi. You know, they are the holders of those stories. So I think it's exciting, Hemi. I think this town can be really cool.
One thing that's emerged over the last few years is just whether or not it's safe. You know, is it safe for our stories to be told here?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's us. It's just a question. It doesn't necessarily apply here. It applies actually in every part of this this country, whereby not everything is ready to be told. Are we courageous in respect of ready to talk about some things? Is there an opportunity for reconciliation, perhaps, through some of the developments? I'm not sure, but we just need to think about the right process to be able for iwi to tell those stories, and some will be ready, some won't. But it doesn't. I think it's really exciting, but it's got to come through the master planning, and not any time later. As Donna said, we've probably all been involved with projects quite late in the piece where we just called in to slap a few things on the wall and put a few decal on the windows.
And to bless it.
Yeah, or to bless it, you know. So while that's good, and I respect that, that people are having good intent around that, I think we've moved beyond that. I think we moved beyond that point as a community to have early discussions, set the right values and first principles in respect of whatever's been developed, and things can merge from there, because that's probably safer for everyone. And I think we've moved a heck of a long way from that.
I think if people are wanting us to engage in the building, be welcomed into the building and things like that, then that foundation has to happen.
Yep.
Otherwise, as you said, we're there for the blessing and and the occasional other blessings that may happen within that building, but that's the only time you'll see us. Yep. And that's sad. That's really sad. So
when things start going wrong, the first thing you do is go back to your first principles. Yeah, we do anyway, in respect of how to engage with each other how do we commit back to these things that we all have aspirated, these universal things that we aspire to achieve. And when you've got so many million ideas that you're trying to articulate through the course of a master plan, those first principles and values are the things that are going to help you make the decision about what to go for, what we can do, what we can't do, and so on and so forth. So I can't stress enough about the importance of setting those foundational values. What does this community want to collectively dive into in respect of our mokopuna, our intergenerational future? Because ultimately, as I said, as we know, our kids, grandchildren, great-grandchildren want to inherit the work we do.
Just going back to Pouwhakahaere, and when it is right to tell stories, my great-grandfather was at Pouwhakahaere. My grandmother was born at Pouwhakahaere. Pouwhakahaere for me, I grew up in New Plymouth, it was just down the road, and we visited Pouwhakahaere. But the stories were kept secret because there was just so much pain.
Yeah.
And so then it became, probably our generation really started telling the stories of Pouwhakahaere, because my mother never talked about it because there was still so much pain. So, ko tēnei te wā, when there is a time for everything. So, and that's the beauty of the pain. There is so much pain in many of our stories that we have to allow the pain to kind of sit, kind of heal within ourselves before we can tell the story, so that it doesn't have that bite. And that when we are ready to tell it, we talk about kia tau te rangi Māori. We can tell it within a peaceful way. So those are just the beautiful complexities of working with us as iwi Māori, but as a people as well. So are there any questions? We'll open it up to the floor.
Sometimes it's easier to answer questions.
Yeah, I was thinking that, otherwise you and I could talk all night.
I'm not used to talking.
I said it's an hour, it's now. Fair Haka was here, it's 20 minutes each. So are there any questions?
So Donna, first of all, thank you. It's very insightful and very educative and awareness raising, and ultra important. Just we're surrounded by what if phrases. From what you've talked about and presented, and with you and I were talking earlier today on what do we do with all of this come next week when it all folds down. One of the key thrusts going forward would be from you folk, your what if, so that it doesn't get lost. We don't want it to just evaporate. We don't want what you're saying to evaporate.
I have loved this from the beginning, and Anne has taught. Anne is my friend, and she sort of shared it because we've had other kaupapa while we've been together. And I remember the very first one was, she was so excited. It was about getting architects together and things like that. And of course, when it comes to Māori architecture in Nelson, we can mainly think of Kenny, and he hadn't made it. And I thought, well, who else is in that very first kōrero that was so important? And it's nobody's fault. I need to make that really clear. That how do you engage with Māori at the beginning? I think when the light bulb goes, boom, I've got this idea, that's the time to move and to engage with us, not halfway through, not whatever, but we want to be there right at the beginning, so that we can both share an ownership over wherever this goes. And I think that's it really, is wanting to be part of something. Now let me make this really clear, the last couple of months for us have just been horrific, with the Nelson tents, with the kapahaka, with people who have passed away. Our lives and our busyness has been really, but we can always, Hemi, I think if we need to, we can get people there, can't we?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, We can always get people there. And I think that's about what is the council's relationship with iwi, what are other arts groups and other communities groups like with Māori. And, you know, it's great if you've got a Māori person in your group, that's fantastic. But are they mana whenua? And said it gets really complicated. But it doesn't really, you know. We all have these wonderful offices, so, and we have phone numbers, and, you know, we give us a call, Hemi? Is that what I should be saying?
Yeah, no, I think the process to engage you has been set out quite clearly through our general managers. I'm the CEO of Ngati Tama, by the way, and so I think there's been, like from a communications perspective, I don't think it's a no surprises. I don't think it's going to be a surprise. But just with my iwi hat on, I'll always look at your value set, like what are the key values you're trying to articulate? And so those are the things that will resonate for me when I look at the proposal, when it comes through, whatever avenue or mechanism it comes through. And so there will be some things that resonate with iwi, like sustainability, access to services, you know, all of those kinds of things, cultural hubs. Those things will resonate from a kind of project and a planning kind of basis, but in terms of engagement with iwi, I mean, geez, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there are things coming through the pipeline, if that's what your kind of question is, if that's the kind of gist of your question. I think I don't think that it'll come as a surprise, but stand to be corrected, of course.
Donna, the museum presentation was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really interesting. It was lovely to hear that they had Olivia and they had a working group with them, and that was a really great thing to hear. But I want people, when they talk about their projects, to tell me the story of the building, you know, and I don't think, I may have not been understood. Doesn't seem strange that a building should have a story, but it's not to us. You know, it's important to us. Okay, and I love that Hemi could go through these and see them with a Māori lens and actually be able to actually verbalise what he was talking about. And I think that's it. If we were to go through this with our lens, what would these look like? You know,
build an intergenerational hub to the city. You know, that we all. It's a good principle and a really nice value. Rooftop gardens, you know, talks to sustainability and all of those things. They're all things that will resonate.
I think we all want the same thing, a really good future for our mokopunas, you know. Most of the things that I want to do now are based purely on telling stories for my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, whatever. So that, and they're all value-based. They're all about our tikanga. So yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Feels like with the city that we need to be sitting down and having a bit of a values debate or discussion, like really broadly the whole community. And I don't know how, when that could occur. Like how do you see how that could take place? Like as a
We're constantly doing it.
I haven't been involved particularly in this process, so I'm not sure of your timelines and your project plan and all that kind of thing. And that may have already been established and happened already. But yes, sorry, in short, I'm not sure I could answer that, to be honest, because I'm not sure of the kind of broader timeframes.
One way you could keep this sort of thing happening is to have an online think tank where it's welcoming of all walks of life. You know, so you have a 1 minute video or whatever, and that person discusses for 1 minute or 2 minutes what their presence and past and potential is about Nelson, and keeping it alive inside of that sort of think tank dynamic might be really powerful tool moving forward.
I look at Wakatu Incorporation and most of our iwi working on 500-year plans, 1,000-year plans. You know, and they're all valuable. They're tikanga based for us. So yeah.
So So often think tanks are just limited to an field of expertise, and they don't include people on the street. They don't include people that come to these places to say that stuff. So something that's readily accessible, like an online think tank, would be really helpful.
I think for us also, and we, you know, the mokopuna thing is that all our iwi and corporations are putting so much into our children and succession and our grandchildren. And so the wānanga, taking our children onto the whenua, the reo sessions, all those beautiful things.
I'm looking at some of these that people are obviously resonating with, the making, you know, carbon as part of the consideration, notwithstanding the fact that it's loading up costs and all these complex kind of mechanisms, but people are resonating with those kind of values, future value set things. You've got the carbon piece, mandatory for people to consider future generations. Of course, there's the wearable arts. There was bird feeders in here somewhere as well, more native, more attracting of bird feeders. So I'm just looking at that now and going, yeah, these are all things that are resonating with people from a strong first principles and values idea. People want to come and have a kai, they want a place to be, interact with each other, support each other, love each other, and so on and so forth. They're all first principles things that can really shape the planning process here. And those are the things we want.
It's all about connection for whanaungatanga.
Sorry.
You mentioned about the safety, cultural safety of being able to share your stories, and apart from as a Tangata treaty, educating ourselves about the treaty and local history, is there any other things that you would like us to do to make it more safe, even safer? Great question.
Not sure. Probably it's just safety,
I almost want to do, you know, live well and prosper, you know.
People want a safe place to be.
Yeah. I think when it comes to, what do we call it? The treaty in particular, yes, to learn your place within the treaty, my place within the treaty. We're in interesting times, so there are probably quite a few of us who are looking at collaborative work. How can we come together? I mean, the treaty for many of us, it just is. And we're not going anywhere, you know.
This might be a little bit contentious given the current government's direction, but use of language is really good. If as a city or a town we're committed to, you know, bilingualism, I think it's a really courageous step to go forward. What do we really lose? I don't think we lose anything. I actually think we gain a heck of a lot more as a community. So just some of the things which we're probably already thinking about already.
I love it, the amount of people who since the election have, and I could be out on the cafe, have deliberately walked up to me and said kia ora. You know, I am really grateful, you know, and totally unexpected, but I'm really grateful. So,
Symbolism, cultural responsive spaces, you know, things like that. Placement of different things to do in a way that's culturally responsive. Just those are some of the things that come to mind.
The things you already know, continue to do them and build on those things. So, but be true to yourself too, you know. I think one of the beautiful things about partnership is when you're dealing with somebody who's Scottish, Irish, whatever, and they know their whakapapa, you know, and they're strong in their whakapapa because the connections are very easy, you know.
I'm really, really big on informing people. And so there are always ways through a planning process to create opportunities for people to know a little bit more about something that they may or may not know about. So opportunities for opportunities for historic trails and walks in the spaces that are already being contemplated as part of future development. Yeah. They don't have to be in your face, 500 word intert panels. They can just be something very simple, very subtle, but it might spur an opportunity for someone to know a little bit more about our city. That's a little bit softer, rather than a big hammer, which people don't like. I don't like that. It's not my way, but yeah.
Wow. Fantastic, thank you so much. Lots to think about, and the challenge you give us to work out where this goes forward, and that we are respectful of the iwi path and all this. So thank you so much. It's most appreciated.